At the age of 17, I decided I wanted to be a writer. Not because I'd been much of a reader. I hadn't. I'd come to England barely interested in looking at more than 2 sentences strung together. The books my mother urged in my direction spoke nothing to me. Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, A Tale of Two Cities, proper English literature, which as far as she was concerned, was required reading for a person to be considered cultured. But I was no English Rose. I was Jamaican with a Chinese father and a mother of mixed Chinese African heritage who, as a result of her own Catholic school Jamaican education, extolled the virtues of the classics and compelled them upon me. And then one day, I borrowed from my sister a copy of James Baldwin, Tell Me How Long the Train's Been Gone, which I devoured and which changed my life forever. There's Another Country, Giovanni's Room, Go Tell It on a Mountain, and then there was Hermann Hesse and Sartre and Camus and Kafka, and so the time passed, Zora Neale Hurston, and my 2 great loves, Toni Morrison and William Faulkner. And what I finally realized was what I'd suspected all along, that ever since I landed on these shores at the tender age of 10, I had been living in exile. And the faith that I'd put up to that point in time into the certainty of mathematics and chemistry and physics was grounded in my sense of alienation and my fear of feeling anything. For why bother with that? Why suffer when it was easier and safer to focus on the demands of carbon tetrachloride and differential calculus? The truth was I felt estranged, the outsider, out of step with everyone and everything around me, disinterested in the everydayness of ordinary life, emotionally detached. And like Kafka's Joseph K., I felt someone must have been telling lies about me, because I found myself on trial for a crime I did not understand. Or did I? Because unlike Joseph, I did have an inkling. I knew it was because I was here, in a place where I was not wanted and where people saw life and approached it in ways incomprehensible to me. Mothers who'd call their daughter into the house for dinner, or tea as it was, while leaving me standing outside on the doorstep. Children who'd call me mean and nasty names and follow me down the street making monkey noises, spitting at me, shoving me around, abusing my possessions, slapping me across the face. Teachers who would stand by in the playground or the school corridor as they witnessed my humiliation. And all of this taking place in a deadly barren land. Not just because of the apparent absence of humanity or the cold and rain and gray skies, but because of the emptiness. A place in which you could not find anything, not a truck in a tire to inflate to take to the beach, or a bicycle wheel rim to roll along the road with a stick. Not even a couple of pieces of wood could you find if you wanted to nail something together. There was nothing, not even color. So when I came to write all those years later, it would be of home, where there was life and things made sense and where I belonged. But the thing about home for the exile is that home does not exist. It is always invented through a process of selective memory, of longing, a sentimentality and wishful thinking and romanticism, all created to cover over or compensate for the pain of our loss and yearning for a place and time that cannot be returned to, or more truthfully, never really existed. It is a home that is evoked in response to our current situation, not simply in material terms, but in the heart. It's how we feel about our circumstances, how accepted we feel, how integrated, how safe, happy, how at ease. In other words, how much we feel at home. And so our nostalgia and reinvention of home becomes shaped by how agreeable we find our current lives. If things are bad, then home was heaven. If things are better, even good, then home was hell. And the longer we're away from home, the greater the invention, the greater the selective memory, since we remember what we choose to, and we craft those memories in ways that reassure us and bring comfort to our lives in the here and now. Underlying all of this, of course, is the reason why you left in the first place. Maybe to make a better life in a promised land, to escape persecution perhaps, to find freedom or different freedoms, to pursue our art. Or some, it's to evade the expectations and predictability of their middle-class lives. Or like me, a child who is taken without question or choice. Whatever the reason, we are always homesick for something. However good today might be, the solution? Bring a piece of home. Caribbean food, reggae music, carnival. Gifts to a society that might otherwise see us as aliens, interlopers even. Here to steal their jobs and their women. And generally to lower the tone of the place with our blackness. But on the streets of Notting Hill we can gather. And together with the host community we can sing and dance and eat and make merry. And we can make ourselves acceptable, tolerable, non-threatening, because we're just happy islanders who know how to have a good time. But what's it all about really for us? Positive recognition, appreciation, approval, certainly. It's also about us rejoicing in our cultural traditions, our links to home, our connection to our roots. It's a reminder for us that we're from somewhere else, somewhere warmer, somewhere happier, somewhere we belong, somewhere we are free. We want to embrace that. No one wants to live completely in exile, and yet sometimes we also want to draw a line, a kind of decolonization, a patois demarcation that distinguishes between those of us for whom Jamaica is home and those of you who are tourists in the land of wood and water. Because something is shared, but something else is also retained in an act of resistance, lest we drift away into a sea of nothingness where nowhere can be called home. Actually, people have stopped asking me this, but when Power was first published, I would often be asked, why it is that I still call Jamaica home, even after living in England for well over 45 years. And a question threw me initially, but what I finally figured out, and this is now my stock response, is that I will call England home when the English stop asking me where I'm from. And that was it, the nail on the head, because as long as I'm perceived to them as an alien, then I'll never be completely at rest. I cannot live with ease, not even as Black British, whatever that means. At least Chinese Jamaican has a cultural identity, it carries meaning. But what is Black British? And who does that actually include anyway? Not me. On census returns and equal opportunities monitoring forms, I still have to classify myself other. But then life's complicated, even the Chinese Jamaican part, because how many people, especially in the UK, have ever heard of Chinese Jamaicans? So very few. And what does it mean to be Chinese Jamaican, here or there? And all of this is how POW came to be. It was my return from exile. It was my putting my foot back on the ground on Jamaican soil. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually even. Returning to a place that held something for me, memories, significance, meaning, a sense of identity. It was what I knew about, what I wanted to write about, even though my first visit home was 20 years in the coming, and it was 37 years after leaving Kingston before I started work on the book. My aspiration from the beginning was to write a commentary on contemporary political history of Jamaica. My version of it anyway, not that I wanted to change the facts or rewrite history, but rather I wanted to make my Chinese characters visible and show how our lives in Jamaica dated back over 150 years, why and when we went there, and how we helped to build a nation alongside the African Jamaicans who'd been brought originally as slaves, Indian indentured laborers, Lebanese traders, Jewish merchants, and poor working whites. And I wanted to show people living together through the changes, adapting and reconfiguring their lives, and importantly, coming to their own view, their own take on what it meant to be independent after 300 years of British rule, what it meant to be part of a minority Chinese community in a majority population increasingly vocal and insistent about its African roots and heritage, and why our national motto, out of many, one people, is so important to every Jamaican. But home, like life, is complicated. And I wanted to admit that too. I wanted to be honest. Jamaica is not the perfect paradise. It is divided by inequalities and discrimination along lines of race, class, gender, sexuality, wealth, and color. It is riddled with the social and cultural prejudices that British colonialism created and left behind. And it struggles with the legacy of slavery, which occupied the body and, in some words, more detrimentally, occupied the mind. The facts, those were relatively easy. Strikes and civil disturbances in 1938, the vote in 1944, full integrated government in 1957, independence in 1962, a state of emergency in 1965, Michael Manley comes to power in 1972. That was all straightforward enough for a seasoned researcher. The memories, that was a different matter. Half remembered, half imagined. An invented story to gift to my father a longer and better life than the one he'd had, and an invented homeland to heal my aching and exiled heart. Tauligoff recently coined the term thrice diasporized, referring to those of us who are shaped by the experience of the African diaspora, the Asian diaspora, and the Caribbean diaspora. I'm not sure what I make of that, but what I know as the author of Pow and Gloria and the yet-to-be-published Faye is that the Jamaican homeland I've created is accurate to its history, authentic in its telling, albeit in a somewhat hybrid vernacular, not written for the white gaze, but for the people whose story it is, and honest from the perspective of knowing that I have reinvented home through my selective memory of a half-forgotten place. And with Jamaica, that Jamaica, my Jamaica in existence, it seems that I can now settle in England.